Let's talk about some of the most common challenges that people face when they're making decisions. And this very first one is probably one of the ones that you all thought of, which is emotions clouding your judgment. How many times has this happened to you? Like all the time, right? And I think one way I want to tell you, I'm glad it does, because it tells me that you're a heartful leader, that you have empathy, care, and concern for people and the impacts that your decisions are going to make. So I get it. Emotions are kind of a part of who we are and how we lead, but we also don't want our emotions to override our good judgment, or maybe to cloud our judgment, so that we're not really making the very best decisions we can. We feel all kinds of things, right? So overwhelmed about the amount of information, or about the enormity of the consequences of what might come from our decision. We feel anxious about the impacts of what's going to happen. Sometimes we've all felt paralyzed because we either have too much or too little information to be able to make the decision that we need to make. And then I think a lot of times we feel pressured, like we know we're going to make a decision that might be a bit unpopular. And we know we're going to get a lot of pressure from people about that. And it feels frustrating to us. And those are the emotions that we're dealing with. So what can we do about them? Well, I'm going to teach you a little technique that I share with my coaching clients. And those of you who've been in some of my teachings and my workshops know that I'm really big on neuroscience. You're probably wondering, why is there a picture of a waterfall here on the slide? I want you to imagine you're standing on the ledge that's right down there in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture. You're standing on this ledge as if you've gone on a hike. You've come across this beautiful waterfall, but you're standing safely on the ledge, so you're not being swept away by the rush of the water. So now I want you to imagine that waterfall is the stream of consciousness in your mind. It's your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. And here's the key. So you see them, you observe them, and you say, yes, I know that I feel emotional about this decision. But you are not being swept away by those emotions. This is kind of the practice of what's called self-observation, which is sort of standing outside of yourself a little bit, non-judgmentally, seeing what you're feeling, but not being carried away by those things. It's a simple little trick that's really very useful when you feel those emotions kind of flooding over you. So you want to feel those emotions, but you don't want to be swept away by them. Another trick you could use that's very useful is to get somebody else's perspective. You want to turn to a trusted colleague, somebody who you can check in with, to say, hey, let me kind of walk you through my thinking here. And you tell me, do you think my emotions are stifling my common sense and sort of swaying me one direction or another? And a trusted colleague can give you that sort of that objective perspective that you really need. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two, jumping to conclusions. How many of us have done this? Pretty often, right? And largely it's because we feel rushed. And so I want to challenge you a little bit, because I know we feel like we need to move really fast. And right now, especially as the business and the environment is changing dramatically, we feel like we need to keep up. And some of us have a strong instinct to really just sort of dive in, and be able to really start making things happen. But that can also really work against us. We sort of have this sense of the fact, if we're honest with ourselves, is that we want to look good. We want people to think that we know how to lead. And of course, in our minds, we think, well, I'm supposed to know. I'm supposed to have the answers. I'm supposed to be able to make good decisions. And what happens when I don't feel like I can? Another thing that we feel, and one of the reasons we rush, is because we think our assumptions are good. And why would we think that? Because we know we shouldn't be making assumptions. But very honestly, we make assumptions because things have worked for us in the past. And so we assume that the situation that we're experiencing today would apply. And not always is that the case. So if you're a fan, as I am, of Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, he teaches us about our brains. And I'm big on the neuroscience and how our brain works, as you know. But part of what he teaches us is this idea of system one thinking, which is automatic thinking. It's thinking where it's based on intuition and snap judgments that we make, or our memories from things in the past. So this is when this can really work against you. If you're rushed and you think you're going to make mistakes, because you're not going to you're not going to understand and consider all of the things that you should. So what are some fixes for this mistake? Well, the first one is, I know your goal is to be thoughtful and intentional. So I want you to slow down. Slow down when you have an important decision to make, because clarity takes time. Your brain cannot process a lot of complex information in a very rapid way. It will very quickly overlook a lot of important facts and information that you need to be able to make a good decision. So I want to challenge you that if you have a big decision to make, you need to clear your calendar and you need to set aside some time when you are not distracted and you're able to really sit down and think and really work through a very big decision. Because the most important thing is not to make the decision quickly, it's to make the right decision. Another tip I'm going to give you is to sleep on it. So we've all heard this, of course, and it's great to remind ourselves that we need rest, but I'm going to tell you why specifically to sleep on it. Your brain needs certain types of fuel in order to be able to work at its best. So you need water, glucose, and guess what? You need sleep. Probably the most underrated brain fuel that we have, because we all think, oh, I can get by on just a couple of hours. No, you can't. You might for a very short period of time, but your cognitive abilities are going to really be impaired if you're not rested. So if you have a big decision to make, I would tell you to set aside some time to really think it through, kind of map out what you think your best options might be, and then sleep on it. Get up the next day with a rested mind and feeling a bit more relaxed, so you'll have the energy and the motivation to really stick through and work through whatever this complex task is that you have to face. And then the other thing I wanted to tell you about how to make sure that you're not jumping to conclusions is to really ask yourself whether you need to accelerate and move forward on a decision or whether you need to wait. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about motorcycling here. You know, I like to ride a motorcycle. One of the things that I learned about in motorcycling was how to shift gears. You do that by kind of like squeezing on the clutch lever in your left hand. And then you have to very artfully and carefully release the clutch lever to engage the engine to the wheel so that you can move forward without sort of lurching forward or worse yet, stalling. And if you've ever learned to drive stick shift, you know how that goes. But this sort of magical space where you're releasing the clutch and you're engaging to get traction is called the friction zone. And it's sort of a feel thing. You really have to learn how to do it. And it's very hard to get right and requires practice. And I thought to myself, this is exactly the same way it is in making good decisions. You have to learn when to pull back and kind of wait for things to develop and when it's time to go full throttle, if you will. So here's an example. I want you to think of a time when you made a decision, when you thought you knew how you wanted to decide and the right way to move forward. And you were like, okay, go, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to make this decision. But there was something in your gut that said, doesn't feel quite right. Like, I'm not exactly sure that I've thought this all the way through, or do I really have all the information I need? Or is there some sort of just rationale that just doesn't really seem to sit right with you? It doesn't seem to make sense. You're not maybe sure exactly why, but you're just not sure. So against your sort of more speed up nature, you decide to slow down and you wait. You wait just to see if something else develops. And eventually something does come to light. Maybe it's a piece of information that you really needed. It's an aha or an insight that you had after you had a good night's sleep and you began to really kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together better. Or maybe you got to hear from a person who had just the right information and point of view that you needed. And it made all the difference in your confidence or your clarity about the decision that you needed to take. And I just think, again, this is a little bit sort of a feel thing, but I think it's so crucial because the reason is I want you to learn to listen to that voice in your head. Oftentimes it's a very quiet voice in your head that can kind of tell you, just wait just a little bit and let's make sure. Or when you know, yep, it's time to move forward. And the third mistake I wanted to tell you about is being able to really kind of stop playing it safe all the time. I know that's easy to say and it's hard to do, but there are a lot of reasons why we play it safe in life and we don't make the right and best decisions that we should. And the reasons for that is because we're afraid. We're afraid. We're all human. Everybody's afraid of something. I don't care what title you have, how long you've been a leader. It does not matter. You're human and everybody has fears. And these are fears that are come to us through life experiences or things that have happened to us, or just what our expectations and hopes are for ourselves. We don't want to make a mistake. Certainly, we don't want to look foolish. We don't want to lose a relationship in the process of making an important decision. We certainly don't want there to be a lot of negative consequences around the impacts of our decisions. So we're afraid. And those fears, those self-limiting beliefs, hold us back from making really good decisions. And I think the challenge there is we then don't try new solutions. We're not very innovative in our thinking. We don't find maybe the better answers that we should. And especially at a time like right now when everything is changing around us, all of the things that worked in the past may or may not be working in the future. We may need new solutions to new problems, which is going to require us to open our minds to really see and think in very new and different ways. So how do you do that as a leader when you're making a big decision? Well, I want to ask you and challenge you to get diverse points of view. Ask your team, ask some people on the front lines who are working with your clients and your customers. Seek out a peer who works in another part of your company or in a different part of your industry, and get diverse points of view about how somebody might approach this particular decision. That fresh perspective is really, really powerful. One of the things it does for you is it helps you not be your own worst enemy. And what I mean by that is we all have decision-making biases, sort of attitude or this framework of how we think about things. And we sort of fool ourselves into believing that we know and that we have the right answer. A lot of times I think leaders are very guilty of something called confirmation bias, which basically is, I'm just trying to prove what I already think, which of course happens a lot in today's society. Instead of saying, gee, I wonder what other points of view might be on this and what I could learn by listening to other people. Another thing that you could do that's a really simple leadership technique is to just ask them to think in very new and different ways. For example, you could say, what if we were willing to buy a fresh perspective they could bring from another industry? So you see, by just simply asking good questions like that, you open up your mind as well as your team to think about the different ways that they might approach a particular challenge and be able to make better decisions. So I hope that was helpful. So that was our 3 steps. And it was also, it was the 3 mistakes as well as some tips on how you can avoid making those 3 mistakes. So let me shift gears for just a second now and get to the second part of our time together, which is what are the 3 critical steps? So this download, I'm just going to give you a sneak peek here, is called Decision Decode. I'm going to tell you how you can get it at the end of our time today. And this is a framework that I put together a couple of years ago to kind of solve my own problems on being able to be a lot calmer, a lot more confident, and to be more consistent in my decision making. I share it with a lot of my executive coaching clients as well. I don't typically make this available publicly, but I just felt so compelled that this topic right now is something that we all need as leaders to help each other to figure out how do we do a better job of making these crucial decisions. So I'm not going to get into the whole framework right now. I'm just going to walk you through the 3 main steps in the framework, and just know that when you get the download, there'll be a whole lot of questions and ways that you can really think through to make these important decisions. So let's talk about what those steps are. So step 1 is discover. So this is a stage that I want you to be sure to take. It's very valuable because basically it helps you do your homework. So it keeps you from rushing, from jumping to conclusions. It really lets you sort of kind of settle in and understand and say, what are the facts that I need that are really relevant to this situation and are going to be useful and meaningful when I begin to make a decision. You're also going to be able to clarify and ask good questions of yourself. And I think this is a big one that leaders need to ask, which is getting to the heart of an issue, which is what are we solving for? You know, a lot of times I think decisions have these layers and people get confused and you don't really know what you're solving for. So you want to clarify that question very, very early on. And also benchmark to see what options might be out there. You know, very rarely do we ever face a problem that somebody else hasn't already faced. So it really helps to be able to go and see what are some options that I need to explore. Step 2 is to discern. So this is kind of where you roll up your sleeves as a leader and you really become more of a strategic thinker here to test the underlying assumptions, to really sort of think through which criteria matter the most to you, because not everything, you know, nets out the same. You want to be able to weigh pros and cons, to sort of figure out what's more important than something else. And you might even consider trade-offs. What are some exchanges that you would be willing to make? I'll give something up in order to be able to get something that's a lot more valuable to me. So this is what the step of discerning will do for you. And then step 3, of course, is when you decide, it's your ability to be able to figure out what is the right and best option for us. And why do I think that? And then carefully considering, who do I need to communicate with around this decision? In what order do I communicate to people? How do I provide enough context that people understand how I came up with the decision that I did? Am I properly empowering people to be able to implement the decision that I've made? Have I, moved the barriers away from them so that they can really move forward to make things happen? And then, of course, this last one, manage and monitor, I'm really big on this one, which is, how do I challenge myself to be a learning leader? To say, I may not have the decision perfect right out of the gate, but it might be pretty close. And I know that I can modify my decision as I go. If I'm getting feedback that says something's not working exactly right, how do I handle it in there? So I really like that phase of deciding sort of what I think is finishing strong when I make a good decision. So of course, all of this, being a better decision maker, my goal is to give you greater confidence, greater clarity, and greater consistency in how you make decisions. I think this is really key, because we stand back for just a minute and think about the current time we're in. It's a watershed moment in history. For better or for worse, things are not going to be exactly the same anymore. And we need to be able to lead in this way much more than we ever have before. The world is just complex, and things are changing daily. I mean, that's kind of the shock, is how much you could sort of count on things to be the same for a period of time, and that's just out the window now. And as leaders, we need to be a lot more agile to see what's possible, not just what is. And I think this is just perhaps the most crucial thing for us to think about today, is that you need to be a leader who can really not just be just a good decision maker for what's happening right now, but you need to be able to be what I call a future thinking leader, somebody who can get on the balcony, so to speak. I love this sort of analogy. Is this idea of, how do I get out of the chaos of the day to day of my leadership challenges and sort of the urgent of the day? And how do I kind of stand up and look out and see broadly across my organization, across my industry, into society, and to see how things are changing, because I need to be able to make good business decisions about that. And there's these sort of 3 things that I think are so crucial about this idea of, how do I become more of a future thinking leader? I need to be able to figure out what's coming, what are going to be the impacts of those changes, and what do I need to do to prepare? And this set of questions and this sort of idea about seeing the future more clearly, honestly, has become like one of my number 1 priorities in helping my clients that I coach and all of the leadership training that I do, because it's the thing that's the biggest pain point that leaders have right now, is I need to be able to see what's coming and make good business decisions about that. I'm convinced that being able to see what's coming is going to be, in fact, probably your most important leadership skill, if I could be so bold as to say that. I think the idea of you being a future thinking leader is absolutely essential right now, especially as we're starting to reopen our economies and we're seeing our clients and our communities begin to try to figure out, how do I navigate this sort of near-term time period, which is probably the rest of 2020, maybe into 2021, and how do we reimagine this future and find a very specific way forward? How am I going to do that? And this has just been so on my mind, because I could see the pain that very accomplished leaders were having trying to think this through. And I thought, I got to help. Like, how can I help us help each other? How do we begin to think differently about the future? And where are those sort of critical thinking skills that we all need right now, probably more than we've ever had before? What can I do to help? How do I dig into this a little bit more and try to equip my clients and my friends to be able to do this? And so this is the news that I have for you today. I've created a course. Now, a couple weeks ago, if you asked me if I was going to do this, I would say, no, not going to do this. but I felt compelled. I had so much research that I had done, created a lot of documents and templates and guides to help my clients. And I thought, I think a lot of people want this help to how to be able to figure out what's coming and how to make the right decisions now so I can sort of stay one step ahead of that. So I've created this new online course. It's an on-demand, self-paced course that you can do at your own pace, at your own time, because I know right now time is really the commodity that very few of us have. But if you want to do this course and you register for it, you can take it whenever you like. It's self-paced, so you can start and finish it whenever you like. It's just a mini course, so it's not really time intensive. But I think it is the most essential skills that we need as leaders right now. So I wanted to give you complete autonomy and control of how you kind of work through the content. That's why it's online, and that's why I decided to make it self-paced. So let me just kind of give you a little bit of sense of what the course has. And I know Katie is going to put in the chat box there a link for you to go to the landing page, and you can get a lot more detail there. But just real quickly, kind of give you a drive-by of what's in it. So there's 4 video lessons that I've done that are kind of like this, where I'm talking to you and I'm walking you through the content. I have created some new documents that you're going to get. So this Future Thinking Leader Workbook is a guide that kind of helps you as you walk through the videos. It has a lot of exercises and questions to really help you apply what you're learning to your situation right now. There's something called the Restart Playbook. And this is a really good e-guide. It's 5 steps to help you kind of ramp your business back up. I love this document particularly because I spent a lot of time kind of creating brainstorming sessions for you. It has over 30 questions in it that you can work with your team, or you can just work with yourself to think about where things are going and what you need to do to pivot your business to be successful in the future. And then the last document here is this Reimagining the Future. It's a planning template to help you really capture your best ideas for your own business as well as for your clients and customers. So the course has a lot of content in it. Why would you want to take this course? So it's not for everybody, of course. It's really only for leaders who are looking to do some very specific things, which is to learn future thinking skills. Like, how can I better predict the changes that are coming and what their impacts might be on the business that you're leading today? You're going to want this course if you want help thinking through what are the best challenges and opportunities for you and how to quickly put new ideas into practice. And then most importantly, I kind of added this one at the last minute because I think this is actually the biggest value to you, is you're going to be able to position yourself and equip yourself to be a much more strategic thinker, because right now I think these skills are in the highest demand amongst leaders. So everybody wants to know, what are the future thinking skills? Well, I have 4 for you. And again, the link will give you a lot more on the landing page, but I'll just give you kind of a quick tease of what these are. The first skill is something that's called weak signals that are indicators of strong change to come. And this, I love this one a lot. This is one of my favorite modules because it's all about sort of predicting future trends and how you know how to take action on those trends. Module 2 is all about something called sense making. So I wrote a blog on this the other day, if you saw that. But I go a lot more into detail about how you really understand the right information that you need, how to analyze that data, how to understand the mood of the moment, you know, sort of the zeitgeist of the times. And then, of course, how to be decisive, which is what we talked about today, so that you can really take action on those things. The third module is envisioning the future, which is all about being able to really get greater buy-in and support from others for your ideas. And this fourth one is a timeless leadership skill you need, which is how to create a culture of try that encourages smart risk-taking from other people on your team. So it's not just you trying to make this heavy lift, but it's you inviting us into it. As you can see here on the screen, lots of course materials that you're going to get. They're all downloadable. They're all digital. They're all fillable. So you can type right on your computer if you want, or print them out, share them with your team if you want to do that as well.